that I have learned.
I need that.
Through all my foolish years,
Yeah.
except that life keeps
You
running.
think? All right, ding. Raise up, Rotarians. Rotarians, wow. Thank you, Ben. Where was that when I was ringing the glass? Rotarians and guests, welcome to the Rotary Club of York and the Yorktown Hotel, a place we once called home. I am your president, Aaron Jacobs, and I am glad that at least once during my term, I had the opportunity to preside over a meeting in a location that's so embedded in our roots. It's a pleasure to see how successful this hotel is, as both theirs and our legacy continues in this community. This is a place that for decades was the hub for service above self in our community. And let us make this room reverberate again with the sound of us reciting the four-way test. Ben, if you will. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. As a 15-year member of this club, this truly is a full circle moment for me. And it's great to see this room just filled with so many great Rotarians again. And speaking of great Rotarians, let's start the program off in song with past President Brian Tate, who will also lead us in the pledge. Past President Brian.
Thank you, President Aaron. Friends, please join me. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please prepare yourself for prayer in the manner in which you are accustomed. A quote from Proverbs in the Bible tells us, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." For many in our community, housing is not within their reach. In York County, we have seen a dramatic increase in the number of homeless individuals and families. The number of unique individuals being supported by the homeless response system annually in York County has increased by 9% in the last 3 years, almost 2,100 people. Our world religious text shows us that homelessness is an old problem and that it is the responsibility of the fortunate to help. In the Bible, Isaiah challenges us to exercise a true fast where we bring to your house the poor who are cast out. Islam requires all Muslims to pay zakah, or a religious tax, to assist and feed the homeless and poor. Hindus are expected to give away the wealth they do not need. Distributing wealth means that a person is doing good karma and thereby securing a better next life. Today, as we hear from our expert speakers, Joyce Santiago and David Gonzalez, on the housing situation in York, let us reflect on the ways we can help all our neighbors and friends find the safety and security of home. Let us also give thanks for the hands that made the meal we shared today in fellowship inside the home our community built, the Yorktown Hotel. All this we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Kelly and Brian. We have a lot of visitors today, so we're going to kind of shortcut this part of the program, and I would like to ask that all of our guests today please stand and remain standing so that you can be recognized by the club. That means you, guests. Up, 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 up. There we go. Hey, you know what sounds even better than the word guest? Future member. It certainly has a nice ring to it. And Rotarians, I implore you to invite more great future members such as these, and be sure to make our current future members feel welcome today with a round of applause. You know, the hotel really looks great, and I gotta say, it feels good to be back downtown again. And past President Brian Tate reminded me that we are in near or darn close to the 1-year anniversary of the renovation of the hotel and finally opening again. And I would like to offer a toast to our host. Rotarians, would you please raise your glass to the Yorktown Hotel? Congratulations on your 1-year anniversary of reopening, and we wish you 100 more successful years. Cheers, Yorktown Hotel. On to announcements. The IDEA Committee, also known as IDEA, will meet on February 5th at 8 a.m. via Zoom. The Literacy Committee will meet on February 6th, 9 a.m. via Zoom. The Nominating Committee will meet on February 6th at 3:30 via Zoom. And the Fundraising Committee will meet on February 7th, 11 o'clock at the Country Club of York. And I didn't get to call his name out, and I'll talk a little more about it, but we do have a special guest with us, District Governor-elect Paul Thompson. Can you please stand to be recognized by the club? I call attention to our esteemed guests because we were asked by the district this week to speak at their conference in March to talk about what we are doing to grow membership in our club. And that's a great segue to invite past president Josh George to the podium to induct our new members to the club. Josh.
Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. It's a pleasure to induct new members here at the Yorktown, where we used to induct all of our members. So it's great to do it again. And as we induct 4 new members today, we are getting ever closer to that goal of 300 new members that President Aaron will not stop reminding you about. So please help us get to that goal so he will shut up about it. We'll be at right around 291, 292 after these members are inducted. So we only have a few more to go to get to that 300 mark. So please help us out as best you can. So without further ado, I will start here in the front. And Kathy, if you can just kind of take a step out. This is Kathy Brown. She is a graduate of Mannheim Central High School, and she went on to do some training with the VA and the Federal Housing Agency in the to earn her industry designations in mortgages and finance. And it certainly makes sense then that she works at Traditions Bank and is a director of mortgage sales. Her community service includes as a board member of Shadowfax and a past officer of the Lidditz JCs. Her hobbies include traveling, gardening, and her puppies, which if you get a chance to ask her about, please do. She'll talk your ear off about that. She is married to Steve. They are the parents of Hunter, who is an adult at age 29, and she is proposed for membership in the club by Teresa Gregory. Ladies and gentlemen, Kathy Brown. Next, we have Brian Kelly. Brian is a graduate of Coggeshall Regional High School in Durham, Connecticut, and went on to earn his Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of Connecticut and his MS in Strategic Leadership and Organizational Development from Elizabethtown College. He works at the High Center at Elizabethtown, where he is the managing director. His community service includes a past board member of the YMCA, past board member with Junior Achievement, also a past board member with Dallastown Youth Baseball, and he is a graduate of the Leadership York Executive Connections Program. His hobbies include hunting, fishing, golf, and coaching baseball. I happen to know Brian well for years. Our kids played baseball together, so I know him at the baseball field. He is married to Nicole, and they are the parents of McKenna, Grayson, Jade, and Shay. And he is proposed for membership by President Aaron. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Kelly. Next, we have Sarah Bradley. Sarah is probably a familiar face to many of you in the room. She is a graduate of Old Mill High School in Millersville, Maryland, and went on to earn her Bachelor in American Studies and Early Childhood Education from UMBC and her Master's in Education from Penn State. She is the recently appointed Executive Director of the York Day Learning Center, and her community service includes many years serving on the board at the York Day Learning Center. And she's also been a volunteer coach for soccer and basketball and field hockey in the Northeastern School District. She's also a graduate of the Mentorship York program in 2017. She's the mother of 3, Ben, who is 15, Allie, who is 13, and Jacob, who is 9. And she is proposed for membership by Brian Grimm. Sarah Bradley. And last but not least, Leona Riga. Leona is a graduate of Tamaqua Area High School and went on to earn her degree from the Schuylkill Business Institute. She is the Executive Director of Human Life Services here in York. Her community service includes serving as the Tamaqua Area in the Tamaqua Area Community Partnership and also with the Church of the Open Door Women's Group. Her hobbies include art, reading, and gardening. She's married to Shannon, and they are the parents of 3 adult children, Jocelyn, Aaron, and Rachel, and she is proposed for membership by Jake Miller Jr. Ladies and gentlemen, Leona Riga.
Rotarians, keep in mind that these fine new members were once a guest of someone in this room. And like I said earlier, they weren't just guests, they were future members, and they proved it. And at this point, like he said, we are only 7 or 8 members away, but here's what you don't know. We just had a membership committee meeting and we already approved a few more members. And I talked to at least 2 or 3 people today who said they're putting in their application, meaning we are less than 5 away from 300. Can I get a hoorah? All right. Keep inviting those members, and Leona, Kathleen, Brian, and Sarah, you are going to make our club even better. Thank you for being York Rotarians, and we look forward to getting to know you. Let us give them one more round of applause. Thank you. Past President Josh George, you say I won't be quiet about membership, which is ironic because as past President Brian Tate reminded me, we lost more members during your presidency than anybody else. It doesn't. I mean, I know it was COVID, but everybody's got an excuse. And with our esteemed District Governor-elect Paul Thompson here, I want to have a really frank conversation with you. I want to tell you that we are having one of the best years at this Rotary Club ever. And I mean that just by the numbers. I know the food's good and we're having great programs, but our membership is growing. Our attendance, if you look around the room, is stronger than it has ever been. And our giving is at an almost all-time high. We need to keep this trend growing, but it starts with inviting your friends. Let's be the model Rotary Club for the district and beyond. Keep up the good work, gang. One more round of applause for this club. All right, Jeff, Joyce, and David, I've warmed the crowd up for you, and I invite Jeff Vermillion to the podium to introduce our program. Jeff.
Thank you, President Aaron. In 2020, the York County Commissioners approved a 10-year Economic Action Plan, or EAP. That EAP identified opportunities and challenges, areas where York County excels, and other areas where we have room for improvement. This EAP is a roadmap for our county to leverage those opportunities and surmount challenges, thus maximizing our county's economic potential. The EAP is all about action. with several new initiatives such as Yoko Fiber or the Trail Towns Initiative, our work with the Cultural Alliance is doing to evaluate economic impact of our cultural assets, and all of those, but are just a few of those initiatives. This EAP was recommended and also recommended and foreshadowed a comprehensive housing study. Whether you've been in the housing market recently as a buyer, seller, or renter, or know someone who has been, or if you just pay attention to the news, you know that we've been in an incredibly tight housing market. While this problem is not unique to York, we have been identified as one of the tightest housing markets in the entire country. While it may be self-evident, it is worth noting how vital access to all levels of housing is to our county's workforce and economic competitiveness. Joyce Santiago, Executive Director and President of Affordable Housing Advocates, and David Gonzalez, Director of Economic Initiatives of the York County Economic Alliance, will provide an update from the recent York County Housing Study. On behalf of an entire steering committee, this report focused on all aspects of housing in our county: market rate, single family, multifamily, rentals, affordable, new construction, redevelopment. For 53 years, Affordable Housing Advocates has been enhancing the quality of lives and communities by advocating for, creating, and sustaining affordable housing options. The York County Economic Alliance drives our county's economic growth through collaboration, resources, and expertise to create sustainable shared prosperity. Joyce and David were critical contributors to the housing study, which partnered with York County, with the York community and economist Fourth Economy. Rotarians, please welcome Joyce Santiago and David Gonzalez.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I drew the short straw here, so I'm opening up for Joyce Santiago, evidently. So in any sense, as Jeff noted, he gave a good overview of both of our organizations and the work that we're hoping to share with you all today. So I'll jump to the next slide. Actually, Joyce, would you like to talk a little bit about Affordable Housing Advocates, just to level set a good bit?
Well, yeah, of course. So we are a 53-year-old organization. We develop, manage, and advocate for affordable housing. And I do want to give a shout out because I have board members here and I have staff members here. So if you could raise your hands, affordable housing advocates. And then I also want to thank, honestly, this housing study, all of the partners and community members that got together. It wasn't just affordable housing providers. It was a true commitment of the community trying to solve a problem together. So thank you, all of you who were part of the plan. I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, and as noted, the York County Economic Alliance, for those who aren't familiar, are York County's Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development Corporation. We also host Downtown Inc. under our umbrella, the Main Street organization here in York, ultimately working for the economic competitiveness of our community each and every day, and helping to lead the York County Economic Action Plan along with partners like Joyce and many in the room as well. So without further ado, we'll jump right into the information of this study. So with the York County Housing Study, as Jeff noted, there was a call out as a part of the York County Economic Action Plan. I don't blame any of you who haven't read it. It's 142 items, 82 pages, but in there is a section that reads, conduct a conditions assessment and needs assessment rather of the York County housing environment. So as a part of that, we needed to pull together partners from throughout the housing environment throughout York County. So that list, I know you can't read it way in the back, but it's 50 some partners representative of developers, real estate, nonprofit organizations, government leaders at various levels of government, all coming together, and also mortgage companies and other partners in that realm, really coming together as an opportunity to convene around the table for those conversations that they haven't maybe shared in that dialogue beforehand, but also are working in that tirelessly each and every day. So that's really what phase one really brought us to, was collecting that data that's readily available and really trying to combat towards the anecdotes of housing. So we have data at YCEA, we have data at York County Planning Commission, census data, various organizations, and really trying to package that all together into one cohesive assessment that we can use and say, okay, beyond the anecdotes, this is what we can say, this is where the housing environment currently stands here in York County. Leading that then takes us to phase 2. So based off of the key recommendations of that assessment that we've finalized, and again, we'll run through the important high notes of that, is can we develop an action plan, priorities that we can build together with the partners to address the pressing needs in our housing environment here in York. So that's really the basis of today, leading us there. So Joyce, I'll let you talk about the key findings.
So there were 4 key findings, and how do I work this, by the way? To the right here. Okay. Those that work with me know I'm a little challenged. There were 4 key findings that came out of the study. On this page, we're showing that nearly half of all renters and more than a quarter of the households in York County are considered cost burden, meaning that they spend 30% or more on the income for either rent or mortgage. The second item noted here speaks about the median household income in York County increasing 24% over the last decade. But during that same period, the median York County home price was also increasing. So what you have is it makes home ownership opportunities just a little less attainable. So the fact that nearly half of all the renters and a quarter of all households in York County are grappling with the burden of housing costs is a stark reminder of the challenges that many residents face. And while it's promising to see that there was a 24% increase in the median household income in York, there's still, like I said, that can't get that word out, but it just makes a lot of challenges. So we wanted to bring that to your attention. And am I going to point right here? There. Okay, there we go. Okay, so an estimated 30% of residents are neither homeowners nor renters, meaning that they're living at home or with relatives. And so for many young adults, the decision to live with family just becomes more prominent because if you have student loans and other bills that you have to pay, a lot of debt, you're going to, do I go move on my own or do I just stay where it's just a little more affordable for me? And then also, many people may not realize that most residents that we've seen an increase in residents in York County. Surprisingly, they're not coming from Maryland. They're coming from Lancaster County more than what you would typically think. Okay. So this slide is showing, and sorry, you're probably not going to see this in the back, but from 2010 to 2020, the population of York County grew by 5%. This is better than a statewide average growth of 2%. So Latino residents increased 3% in the same time period, the greatest increase for populations for any group in York County. And as for job projections, we're anticipating a 3% growth between 2021 and 2026. But it's evident that you can see that our area is becoming a hub, not only for residents, but also for businesses. All right, gets harder and harder to see. So the number of housing units remains higher than the number of households, but the rate of household growth is increasing faster than the growth in housing units. So the takeaway on this slide is that the population growth continues to outpace housing growth. It will increase price pressure, and reduce availability in York County. So this could potentially limit industry growth and the county's ability to retain talent. So it could also exert upward pressure on housing prices, whether you're renting or you're trying to buy a home. And I think
So overall home ownership is strong in York County at large. That is actually outpacing the state in that sense too, where we have just over 70, lost my spot here. Just outpacing the growth of the state really on that sense too, where home ownership, about 76% of the homeowners in York County, and that's compared to about in the state about 69%. So the household income threshold, this is a really important fact here. To be able to afford the average household in York County, which is at $245,000, individuals have to make $74,000. The average income in York County, as of the study was completed, was $72,000. In the city of York, that income is about $39,000 for the average income for residents. So you already start to see the disparities kind of play into shape there. The other thing too, as Joyce noted about the population growth, we still have a white majority here in York County, but we have a significant growth in our Latino and in our Black population as well. But the unfortunate part of the details there is that fewer Hispanic or Latino households actually own their own home. That's 39% versus the state average at 44% of Latino population. Black residents are at 43%. That's both the same rate as in York County and in Pennsylvania at large. So you kind of see as our population starts to get more diverse, which is a good thing, you start to see the transcends of, are they actually being able to maintain that strong home ownership? We know home ownership leads a pathway to self-sufficiency, economic generational wealth. So we really need to take that into account into the long term as this population trends start to take fold. Okay, and then that also builds well with the household income too. So I already noted about that, about the differential there. The one thing I'll want to note too, so I noted about 245 countywide is the average household cost, right? That has actually increased since this data of the study was completed last year. We're at 265 at this point. For a household in the city, for your average median house cost, it's 119,000. Another disparity on the rental market that's important to take note of is that the average rental in York County is just about 1,100. That's countywide. City of York, that's $950. So we're already seeing the income of an individual who's making probably 39,000, paying rents at $950 a month. You already see that those individuals spending way more than 30% of their household income on that. So you don't see the opportunities for people to maximize their economic potential because a lot of that's sunk into home costs in itself too. So next slide. So again, median household income by race and ethnicity. We have the only households that really kind of break that bracket of sorts are white households and Asian households. Latino, Black, mixed race households are not breaking that threshold of $74,000. For the average white household is making about $76,000, so just nearly breaking that threshold of 74 that you need to be able to afford the average home cost in York County. And then York County has a lower median household income than the state among Hispanic and Latino residents, as I already mentioned. So the types of housing, this is really important in the dialogue of the conversation. At Pennsylvania at large, we have an old housing stock. Majority of our homes in York County were built pre-1970s. It's important to consider when you think asbestos remediation, when you think lead abatement, and a lot of the factors that went into home builders practices prior to the 1970s that aren't necessarily playing a role in today's market. Almost 2/3 of housing in York County is comprised of one unit detached dwellings. That's more than the proportion of statewide and also in Lancaster County. The unfortunate part here is some of the data when it shows about how many units we actually have in those structures. So for rental units, York is dwarfed by Lancaster County at nearly double the rate at 20 or more units. And those units are important because those offer the direct pathways for individuals either leaving their parents' household, the household they were raised in, and really trying to become young professionals. And eventually, if they would like to purchase a home, that's usually the pathway towards that. We lack those affordable units, and those affordable units in being strategic locations. Thinking of in main amenity kind of dense areas or service areas, or also close to job centers, close to schools, close to daycare, and that also adds, the invitation of struggling for individuals hoping to gain economic success in that sense. Again, we also got a lot of data from a lot of different partners, the Realtors Association of York and Adams County, for one, providing some critical data. As Joyce alluded earlier in the program, median days in the market. If you recall the kind of the flurry of home buying in the peak of the pandemic at 2020, 2021, days that a house lasted on the market were about 1 to 2 days in that period. We've since, as the pandemic started to go away, we started to see 6 or 7 days. Right now, we're at about an average of 12 days. That is still lower than the statewide average, where the average home statewide lasts about 35 days in the market. Still pretty quick for anybody trying to purchase a home in that sense too, to get their ducks in a row. So you really have to get pre-approvals and everything. But again, as you have those conversations with individuals who are first-time home buyers, you start to unravel a lot of the disparities of just general knowledge of the home buying process. So the demand for York County homes in York County remains high when the average time a home stays is outpaced by the market. The median sale price, already talked about that at the top of it, but what's really important here on this slide is that we saw from the year 2000 in York County to the year 2023, 149% increase in our home costs, where in 2000, you were buying a house about an average 106,000. Now we're at that 264 threshold. For the state comparison there, in 2000, it was about $97,000 that you were buying a house in the state, and 216 is where we're at currently. So York County's median home price has outpaced the state and is still continuing to outpace the state because, as we all know the secret, it's great to live here, but individuals that are coming to this area are still outpacing the individuals who maybe their incomes haven't kept pace. And cost burden households, Joyce, is that? I think that's you.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so nearly half of all renters and more than a quarter of all households in York County are considered cost burden. Approximately 20% of York County residents are considered severely cost burden. This is most pronounced for Latino renters and homeowners in York County, 60 and 34%. Who are cost burden respectively. And then when you compare it to the state, it's 56% of Latinos renters and 29% of Latino homeowners that are living cost burden. And just in case, if you're not sure, cost burden means when you're paying more than 30% of your income going towards rent, mortgage, utilities. Severely cost burden means when you're paying more than 50% of your income to go to the same expenses. Okay, so this map shows land parcels in York County. I know it's hard to see. They have some pretty little colors that are in there as well, but it shows their affordability. And what's key to take away on this map is that a lot of the concentration of where folks are living based off of their income is in the city. It's in areas where poverty is much higher. And so, excuse me. So the takeaway that works for this map is that the county's growth in metro areas continue to be the center for attainable housing. However, maintenance of these units due to age and other cost burden factors are high. And okay, there we go. So housing is still unaffordable for many renters, but there's also a need for 11,700 market rate units, and that's the circle that's on the bottom. That could be linked to the development of new affordable units. But so most renters are living below their means, occupying homes that cost less than what they can afford at their income level. The other little bullet point, shows what we need, what we're lacking for those who are sick, need affordable housing. So recognizing that there's a need for 11,000, well, almost 12,000 market rate units creates an opportunity to strike a balance between affordable and market rate housing. So a well-planned mix of both types of housing can contribute to more inclusive and sustainable housing market.
Okay, so the next slide here is, again, the image is a little hard to read probably from the back on, it's overlaid with vacant residential land parcels and job centers. So if you can see it, the map, there's an overlay of about a purple overlay of where the job centers are. If you can kind of picture it in your head where the job centers really lay in York County, think of the center of the county of sorts, with the city of York be the 30 and 83 kind of corridors, and any direction sort of 20 minutes from that direction. So it go as far as west as Dover, Pelham Township, north is Manchester, Red Lion, Dallastown area. Those are really concentrated as where the job centers are located. And then additionally, you have the Hanover area, the greater Hanover area, and then also in addition, Southern York County, Shrewsbury, New Freedom of sorts too. But the question there is where land parcels are, and does that kind of correlate with what the job centers and their placement availability are? It does not. So we see job centers sort towards the center, and we see vacant parcels speckled out throughout the county itself. The unfortunate part is that we need to kind of do more strategic planning in that sense too, which leads us to more dense, more mixed use, strategic middle housing in these growth corridors, because that's where people want to be. They want to be close to their job, close to the amenities that are utilizing, to their dropping off their children at school. Because even if you the sense of you're thinking about transportation of these individuals, ideally on public transit, if you're driving, about average commute time in York County, 26 minutes. Now, if you're doing about transit one way, you're looking at about an hour and 30 minutes. You add that both ways, you're looking at 3 hours on public transit. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not something that's planned in my day, especially if I have to drop off my child at childcare and also pick up groceries in the same sense. So that's when we try to look at where those ideas of making sure our job centers and where our residents are, that there's alignment in that of sorts. Residential building permits, it's ultimately been down since the Great Recession, as we can all probably imagine. The big statistic here is that since 1991, about 49,000 new construction permits were issued in York County, while only 10% of new residential building permits were issued between 2016 and 2020. So we see a significant decline from that period of time. So building permits ultimately have been remaining low. We are starting to see it slightly tick up, but again, we still need a lot of additional units to keep pace with the demand of sorts too. Couple this with the idea that we're going to have a considerable population growth by the end of this decade. And additionally, that we're expected about adding about 5% of new jobs in York County. Those are jobs, 5% new jobs on top of the current job count we have. So we want to recruit individuals to this community. We need to ensure that they have places ultimately to live, that they can afford, and the units that they want to reside in, and in the communities they want to reside in. So this is an interesting stat on inbound migration. So inbound migration has been at its highest in decades. So in this sense, too, we are seeing our neighbors and the counties around us move towards York County at unprecedented numbers, both at Lancaster, Cumberland, and Adams counties. We're also seeing Dauphin, but considerably from Lancaster, Cumberland, and Adams. Also seeing considerable numbers from Maryland, but again, Lancaster, Cumberland, and Adams are outpacing all of them at our top 10 counties that are continuing to move here. So York County is receiving far more residents than we were actually sending out. Here's the adage that in 2022 to 2023, 85% of new movers were between the age of 50 and 64 years old. So if we're thinking from a workforce component to service the individuals of that bracket, the next 10 years or so, as they need additional health service in the healthcare industry, and also just supplementing anything from that sense, we need young workers of sorts too, but we're not attracting them as of right now. And if we're attracting an older generation, there's a lot of stipulations that can come along with that. It's great our population is growing, but again, it needs to be kind of more diversified and not as leaning towards one side. Outbound migration, we are definitely sending, and it sort of mirrors where we're sending individuals. Again, not to the same scale of that number. We're still sending individuals to Lancaster, to Cumberland and Adams, and also Maryland and Delaware. But York County continues to be a growing destination for residents, especially for those in our neighboring counties. And a stick it to Lancaster is that they're sending more residents here than they are over there. So just if you have friends in Lancaster, feel free to drop that adage later today or later this weekend. Inflow of residents, one thing that's really, and it kind of mirrors that last slide I just mentioned. We're seeing new movers to York County, and you can kind of imagine, and it correlates with that conversation about the job centers. So you're seeing them in the center of the county where it's the main metro area. City of York, you plant the dot and then 20 minutes in any direction, that's where a lot of people are wanting to move towards. Same thing with Hanover and also in Shrewsbury and New Freedom areas as well. Now, the interesting stat here about the individuals who are moving here with highest of incomes also mirroring that number as well. So they're moving to the greater Hanover area. They're moving to the greater York City area as well. So you got to kind of keep that in mind that there's a trajectory here where correlation where people want to be, and also placed off of the job centers and the amenities that are available. Taxes, everyone's favorite topic, especially this time of year. Taxes. So this is important. But not determinative to this conversation, nevertheless. So on the left here, we share about townships, tax holds per household. So at the taxing rate, These figures are based on parcel size, so you kind of have to consider that into the conversation in these communities and are inclusive of taxes paid to different levels of government. So think local, your school, your county taxes, et cetera. So here we're seeing New Freedom Borough as one of the highest. Again, that's by parcel size. There's a lot of new developments in the last decade in New Freedom. So that's what's kind of contributing to that. Alternatively, on the right, it's always been the adage that the city has one of the highest tax rates, but that's also bodes well with the boroughs as well. Boroughs and the city have old infrastructure that they have to maintain. York City is often noted as having the highest, but when it's weighted against the communal taxes of some of these other communities, townships, there are residents in other municipalities who pay a higher amount. So while it looks by rate, it's still not necessarily paid based off of the acreage of the land that their individuals live on. And what to consider. So Joyce is going to wrap us up on what to consider, and then we'll take us to the next phase as well.
Okay. So recognizing that these segments are affordable and market rate housing, that they're interconnected, it emphasizes the need for coordinated efforts that address the diverse needs of residents across different income levels. Also, our community is experiencing a significant gap in attainable housing, in the options for attainable housing. So it is very crucial to address that gap to ensure that individuals and families across various income levels have access to suitable housing that aligns with their financial means. And then to address our community's need for increased density, we must acknowledge the effectiveness of multifamily housing developments. These projects offer a pathway to achieve higher density in a way that is sustainable and aligned with the growing demand for housing in York County. This is one thing. Yeah, I didn't read them all because I didn't want to read them. Sorry. So, okay. So this page here, it's just, we have a strategic plan that has 5 goals, and 2 of our goals talk about increasing the capacity and diversity of affordable housing in our community and building long-term support for affordable housing initiatives in our community. So that's where we want to work with any and everyone, but definitely going to continue our commitments with YCEA to understand, like today, we brought you a lot of data, but to understand that data so we know what it is we're going to target in the future, but we can't do it by ourselves, right? So there were many people you saw in the beginning slides that were at the table working on this housing study. So they're all showing their interest and they're vested in doing the work. So we need to pretty much just get down and do the work, and we'll love to have conversations with any and all of you individually, in a group, whatever it takes, so that we can address the housing needs in our community.
So that was phase 1. So we're at phase 2. And I know it was a lot of data. And again, all of this information that can be accessed on yorkcountyeap.org. We'll make sure we have that information shared. So as a part of phase 1, it was really trying to get that data all together, right? All the combat all of the anecdotes that we know that exist in the housing environment at large, and ultimately kind of use that data to kind of set priority actions and reflective of the key findings that we have gathered. So that's kind of where we're at this point. We're pulling together six focus areas of sorts and priority actions for this housing group that we formed along. And, there's a bunch of coalitions and a lot of different entities really supporting this effort. So I'll sort of break it down a bit. So for first, supporting development of a permanent day shelter for community members experiencing housing insecurity. So there is a collaborative, York County Stable Housing Collaborative, who has a goal of developing a permanent day shelter in the city of York through strong advocacy and funders and other stakeholders. So that goal is essentially providing essential services and comfort for community members experiencing homelessness, a critical need in this sense too for individuals that number has also increased, since the pandemic as well. So again, just making sure those individuals have the basic essentials readily available, even from just using a bathroom, somewhere to safely and confidently use a bathroom, stay warm in the weather, but also access essential services for their potential. Next, collaborating with groups like the Affordable Housing Advocates and other affordable partners to overcome barriers. On its face, that there's a lot more to that. But ultimately, one conversation that kind of came through our our group's discussions was really just trying to provide a gateway for individuals to either work with Joyce and then go for other market rate units or other units available. And knowing that, York Housing Authority, your affordable housing advocates already vet a lot of tenants to a degree. There's an idea that you can make some recommendations with private developers. So that was an open conversation that happened through those dialogue with all these partners. And whether it's creating a tenant vetting program or also looking at for attainable affordable housing set asides as a part of this, as also something we're hoping to gather as a part of that. And ultimately expanding communications with officials, both on the local, state, and federal levels, knowing that, with a coalition like this established, knowing that there is an opportunity to expand upon some of the challenges that exist in funding opportunities. For the next leverage training program dollars to grow capacity for rehab and maintenance of existing housing stock. As I noted in the program, there is a lot of issues with our housing stock to date, knowing that we have an older housing stock at large. So there's a program that came through the state that each community received X amount of money to be able to address maintenance and rehabilitation of existing units. So York County received just shy of $4 million. We worked who is operating as the York County Planning Commission. YCA has worked with that entity to carve out about $1 million of sorts to focus on creating pathways for in-demand construction careers, thinking asbestos lead remediation, electrician. I don't know if anybody has tried to get a contractor to do home renovation of any sorts. You're on a waiting list for a while. So that waiting list for renovating your bathroom, not a huge deal. But when it's renovating for your roof or anything like that, it becomes a large deal, especially when the rain's forecasted. So that's something that we're trying to help out in a sense too, of helping to build the capacity of our individuals too, and get more individuals into those high paying wages. Next is really supporting the York County Planning Commission on a grant that they're pursuing. Essentially, the idea of the gist of it is leading itself towards model ordinances and templates that municipalities can adopt as a part of addressing some of those housing issues that we've seen all throughout the community. The issue here is that we have 72 municipalities, 36 boroughs, 35 townships. The city of York is a part of that as well. So considering that there's not a one size fits all approach that we have to take on here. So there's a lot of conversations we have to have with those individual borough councils, supervisors, and we've already presented a lot of this data to a working group of municipal managers across the community, noting that there is a lot of potential here for this conversation, but to facilitate that, we have to have templates of opportunities for ordinances that these organizations can adopt. Not saying that this is going to be done overnight, because not by any means, knowing that there's been units that have been combated by the public. Those are usually market rate units that are usually on the sense of, and ultimately what we're trying to combat is NIMBYism of the fact too, where there are perceptions of private dense units being built in certain communities that maybe that's not necessarily what the community wants to a degree, but does the community fully understand what those units are going to be? So again, there's large conversations we can kind of go on that side. So zoning reform for certain is a part of that, addressing housing barriers that we need to do. And also as part of the York County Economic Action Plan, there was a goal to develop a housing developers roundtable. And of that is an opportunity to bring partners who are home builders, renovators together and have a collegial conversation of sorts about the issues and challenges that they're addressing on the daily. So that's another goal. In a sense, we can tip our hats to the EAP. And the last one is formalizing discussions of how employers can kind of play into the mix. We had some employers represented on the housing study to start out with, and knowing that employers to date across your county already offer some incentives for workforce housing or ownership incentives. And we're coming at it from an approach that we can provide this template of sorts of good policies that they can employ at their workplace, and even partnership opportunities. Maybe multiple employers come together to the table to invest in workforce housing, knowing that it's that there's issues, and we anecdotally will hear from employers routinely that, yeah, it's great that we can hire somebody, but when they can't find a place to live, they end up going somewhere else for the housing that they're specifically looking for. So again, those are the challenges we're facing each and every day, and that this study is ultimately hoping to address. And a lot more to come in the coming weeks. But thank you for the time on sharing that.
Microphone for questions.
70% of people who are unhoused in York County are working full-time. So I have a two-part question. One is there an opportunity for the York County Economic Alliance to work with its members to help them sign the living wage pledge? Because obviously this isn't just a supply issue. In order to compete in the world economy, our corporations need to attract and retain employees, and they can't do that if employees can't afford to live here. So one way is to address the supply problem, but also workers aren't making enough money. So then the second opportunity is there an opportunity for the York County Economic Alliance to work with its members to champion legislation that would require all new residential developments to have at least 20% of its units reserved for affordable units as defined by PHFA. So that's part one of my question.
That was part one.
Yeah.
All right. So first,
let me give the second part before you answer, please, because I think it's related.
Absolutely.
So obviously health is an important issue here. All these issues tend to be related, and it's very hard to be working a full-time job and making things happen for your family and afford housing if you're not healthy. And I recently learned that a resident of York City has a life expectancy that's 10 years lower than someone in Dallastown. That's 10 years. So how are we addressing and how are we looking at data for health, and could a countywide health department be an option that could be considered with this coalition? Thank you.
Okay. Three questions there. So for the first one, on a sense to York County Economic Alliance established a entity called Welcoming Workplaces. This is bringing together a collaborative effort of businesses, small and large, all throughout York County, who are interested in best practices, policies that they can adopt to attract a workforce and retain a workforce in a sense too. So like I mentioned at the one of the last priority actions is really trying to look to this group to find those opportunities to help support workforce housing at large. So similar as part of that conversation is what we can probably see there with talking about wages and talking about just the opportunities that stand ahead of that. For the second question, just about residential development and putting set asides for affordable units. Again, that's a part of a conversation that came up through the housing study. So we definitely see a pathway there. So with the affordable partners and with the existing developers, for private developers of sorts, to kind of hope that dialogue will kind of foster throughout of that as well. For the life expectancy component, yeah, no shake of the imagination that good housing leads to the wellness of individuals of our population. So we need to make sure that clean, good units that are conscious of the weatherization, and also just making sure that they're just healthy capacity, whether it's lead abatement, asbestos remediation, other environmental factors that contribute to negative housing or negative living in our community. That's something that, again, would have to be part of this next priority action. So all to say that those three are certainly considered as a part of the next steps. And we know it's a marathon we're preparing for here, not a sprint, and we got to do this right.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you have any information regarding the demographics of the people that are moving into the county? Age, income, things like that. Thank you.
Yep. So the one stat line that I had actually in just last year, 85% of the residents that were moving to York County were from the ages of 50 to 64 years old. Now we're seeing a trajectory of just diversity sense. It's mostly on a white population that's moving. And from an income sense, it's about right near about the average income of York County, 72,000. I think the last data set we saw was about 76 was the average income, but they're more affluent individuals compared to on the lower side of some of the trends that we've seen throughout the county. So that's initial data we have. There's more in the report, but just a snapshot for you there. Yep. Okay.
I was just curious for if there's been, and my apologies if it was in the presentation, but if there's been any, if you've looked at similar sized cities and how they're growing, how is York faring with them? Are we growing at a fast rate? Are we sort of on average or above average or?
Yeah, it's a good question. On pace, really, we were looking at just communities really across the Commonwealth, actually, so across the state. Lancaster for one, we were just right neck and neck. I'll take a data set for how many days homes last on the market. So the homes, I guess the community that has the shortest days on the market is Bethlehem in Northampton County, Lehigh Valley for everybody. 8 days on the market is where they're at. So with York County being at 12 days, we're just right in the threshold. Again, consider the statewide average is about 35, sort of truncated in the middle there for that sense. And then also with the average cost of homes, we're still seeing that outpace state average as well for here in York compared to those other communities. So largely, third class cities. We're right up there. And then also counties of our size. Keep in mind that York County is also the 8th largest county in the state. So we are, and of 67 communities, again, leading the pack in many ways. Again, housing costs also happens to be a part of that as your GDP is pretty high. Mhm.
First, I want to say thank you for what you do. Pretty amazing. Can you speak or share a little bit about the affordable housing in areas where maybe the rates of crime are a little higher, knowing that you're looking to put housing where people can work and have accessibility and walking, and they're probably coming with families and children. How do you address the issue of crime?
Do you want to take this question first?
I'm not really sure I'm understanding your question.
Are any of the affordable housing units in areas where maybe it's a higher rate of crime in those neighborhoods or areas where the affordable housing is going to be built or where it has been built?
So for us, when we target to create new additional housing, the first priorities are transportation, schools, grocery stores, the things that folks need. We don't necessarily go in because for me, my assumption is just because we're going to build housing doesn't mean the folks coming in are going to commit a crime, either. So it's the needs of the residents that we're going to serve. That's the goal that we use.
Yes, I understand that. I'm thinking more of how do you keep them safe? So if these housing units are in areas where maybe crime is higher and they're moving in because you're looking out for their well-being.
Right, right.
How do you address the crime in order to keep them and their families safe?
So in our existing units, we do have, like for our multifamily buildings, we do have secure entrances and things like that. And we try to partner with the community policing. We may even have to have a security guard, sometimes in the buildings, but we do try to, because for us, it's not just providing housing, it's ensuring that it's quality housing, and that includes security. So we don't want for any of our units to, even if it's a single standalone, we don't want any of the residents to experience anything negative. So we'll do our part as a community partner. We can't stop it, but we'll do our part.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly hope there's not a test after today's program. But I tell you, my heart grows heavy when I think of the stress that basic housing can cause members of our community. And for me, it's easy. And I think it's easy for the rest of us because we get to go home. And I can close my door and turn a blind eye on something that I know is a crisis. And it's right outside my door, but I learned a lot today. I learned that there's a need. I learned that there's hope. I learned that there's an opportunity, and I know that there is a pathway. But most importantly today, I learned that there is a team who's dedicated to addressing this crucial issue. And when I get to go home, they'll be working hard at it long after. Thank you for all that you do and truly reflecting what Rotary does in service above self. Talk about coincidences. In honor of today's program, David and Joyce have signed the book plate on the last stop on Market Street. Hey, along with the bookmark created by the students at Creative York. And what a great program we had. But next week, we've got another humdinger. Next week, we're going to hear from Rotarian Kim Bracey, who serves as the CEO for the YWCA of York. Kim will speak about YWCA York's mission to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. It's not that bad. Who had the crickets going? Anyway, Kim is leading the organization to strategic financial stability, positioning it as the second largest child care provider in York County and leading efforts to bring awareness to the perils of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and all forms of violent crime. This should be interesting, but having said that, have an amazing Rotarian week. This meeting is adjourned. Ding!
Here alcohol, it doesn't move me at all. But tell me, why should it be true that I get a kick out of you?